I used to love birthdays. They meant candles, laughter, maybe a clumsy poem from my husband, and a card from the kids with coffee stains on it. But on my 40th, there were no flowers. No cake. Just Eric sitting across from me at the kitchen table, his phone face down, his eyes avoiding mine. The silence was heavy, the kind that fills every corner of a room until you can hear your own heartbeat. "Rachel," he finally said, in that tone people use before they ruin your life. "I think we should talk." I knew that tone. I'd used it on clients when firing them, on my kids when the truth had to be dragged out. I never thought I'd hear it from my husband. "About what?" I asked, still smiling, pretending the tension was just nerves from the long day. He exhaled through his nose. "Us. This marriage. I can't keep doing this anymore." The fork in my hand slipped, clattering against the plate. "Doing what, Eric?" "This." He gestured vaguely around the kitchen, at the life we'd built together. The fridge with our kids' school pictures, the counter cluttered with mail, the vase with the wilted carnations I'd bought myself last week. The constant tension, the arguments, your moods. He paused, then added, "And, honestly, the way you've let yourself go." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him, but he didn't flinch. "You're saying this on my birthday?" I asked quietly. He leaned back, arms crossed. "There's no good time to say it. I've been unhappy for years, Rachel. I'm tired of the nagging, the reproaches, the guilt trips. You've changed. We both have. And you think walking out is the answer?" His silence told me everything. Then, like a script he'd rehearsed, he continued, "I've met someone. Her name's Lily. She's younger?" I interrupted. My voice cracked, but I didn't cry. "Prettier? Slimmer?" He looked away. "She's pregnant." That was the moment something inside me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet fracture, deep and final. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there, the sound of the rain outside tapping against the window, like applause for the end of our story. The next day, my son, Caleb, came home from college to check on me, though it felt more like checking which parent to blame. He sided with Eric almost immediately. "Mom, you've been miserable for years," he said, pacing the living room. "Dad deserves to be happy too. You always make him feel guilty." I stared at him, realizing he'd inherited more of his father's words than I ever wanted. "And what about what I deserve?" He shrugged. "I don't know, but this isn't working." My daughter, Emma, just cried. She was 16, too young to understand, too old to believe in fairy tale marriages. I told them both I'd be fine. That was the first lie I told after he left. That evening, I walked into our bedroom, my bedroom now, and looked around. The space felt foreign, as if I'd been living in someone else's life. His scent was still in the sheets. His shirt still hung in the closet, neat and color-coordinated, like he'd planned this exit carefully. And maybe he had. In the mirror, I saw myself 40, tired, heavier, yes, but also someone who had carried everything. A house, a family, a husband's career, a list of everyone's needs but her own. I used to joke that I was the backbone of the family. Now I realize that's what broke first. I packed a small overnight bag. Not because I had somewhere to go, but because I needed to leave. I couldn't stay in a house that echoed with his absence. When I stepped outside, the rain was still falling. It was cold, relentless, but it felt cleansing. I walked without direction, just letting the water run down my face, mixing with the tears I'd been holding back all day. People always talk about heartbreak like it's a single event, one shattering moment. But it's not. It's 1,000 tiny cracks you've ignored until the last one finally splits you open. I ended up at the small park near our house, the same one where Eric and I had brought the kids when they were little. The swings creaked in the wind. I sat on the bench, soaked to the bone, and let the numbness settle in. For the first time, I didn't try to fix it. I didn't try to call him back, to negotiate, to prove my worth. I just sat there, whispering to myself, maybe it's time I finally choose me. The words felt foreign on my tongue. Choose me, as if I'd never said them before. When I got back home, I didn't bother changing clothes. I walked straight into the bedroom, picked up my wedding ring, and placed it on the dresser. Then I turned off the light. And for the first time in 17 years, I slept alone, and didn't feel the need to apologize for it. The first week after Eric left was a blur of silence and paperwork. Divorce documents, bank statements, apartment listings, all spread across the kitchen table like a crime scene. I didn't cry much. Maybe because I'd already spent years doing it quietly, in the shower, behind closed doors, whenever he came home late, and I pretended not to notice the perfume that wasn't mine. The truth is, the end wasn't sudden. It had been growing roots in the cracks of our marriage long before my birthday. I'd just been too busy holding everything together to see how rotten it had become. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It smelled faintly of paint and loneliness. The walls were bare and the furniture secondhand, but it was mine. The first night there, I ate dinner standing over the sink, a bowl of cereal and half a glass of wine. The quiet felt strange. For years, my life had been filled with noise, the kids, the TV, Eric's voice. Now it was just me and the hum of the refrigerator. I should have felt free, but instead I felt invisible. At work, people tiptoed around me. "How are you holding up, Rachel?" They'd ask with those pitying smiles that made me want to scream. My boss reassigned me to a smaller client to reduce stress. I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy. Every mirror I passed reminded me of what he'd said. "The way you've let yourself go." I started avoiding them altogether. One night, scrolling through my phone, I stopped on a photo from years ago. Me, on the beach with the kids, laughing, hair wild, sunburned shoulders. I didn't recognize that woman. Somewhere between school drop-offs, grocery lists, and keeping up appearances, I'd lost her. A few weeks later, I joined a wellness support group at the local community center. It sounded cheesy, but I was desperate to get out of my own head. That's where I met Maya. She was in her 50s, a nurse, divorced twice, with a laugh that filled the room. The first time she spoke, she said, "I stopped waiting for someone to rescue me when I realized I was the one holding the rope." Something about that line stayed with me. After one session, we went for coffee. I told her everything, the birthday, the affair, the way my son blamed me, the emptiness that followed. She listened without interrupting, then said, "You've been carrying everyone for so long. Your back forgot what it's like to stand up straight for yourself." I smiled weakly. Easier said than done. "Everything worth doing is," she said, sipping her coffee. "Start small. Take a walk. Eat a real breakfast. Do one thing every day that's just for you." So I did. At first, it was just 10 minutes around the block after work. Then 20. Eventually, I started jogging, awkwardly, breathless, but determined. I changed my diet too, not out of revenge or guilt, but because I wanted to feel alive again. I started journaling, writing everything I'd never said aloud. Some days I wrote letters to Eric, unsent, of course. Things like, "You broke my heart, but maybe it needed to break to let the light in." And, "I used to measure my worth by how much I was needed. Now I want to measure it by how much I love myself." I didn't realize it at the time, but I was healing. Slowly. Months passed. My body began to change, not dramatically, but subtly. My face softened, my eyes looked clearer, my clothes fit differently. For the first time in years, I felt present. One morning, after my jog, I caught my reflection in the window of a cafe. I almost didn't recognize myself. Not because I looked younger, but because I looked alive. I walked inside and ordered a coffee. The barista smiled at me. Not the kind of smile that sees a tired mother or a broken woman, but just a person. I smiled back. When I got home, I lit a candle, made real breakfast, and put on music. For years, I'd only cooked for others. That morning, I cooked for myself. Emma started visiting more often. She'd sit on the couch doing homework while I worked on my laptop, and sometimes we'd talk late into the night. One evening, she asked, "Mom, do you hate Dad?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. "No," I said softly. "I hate the woman I became trying to keep him happy." She nodded slowly, as if she understood more than she should have. By spring, I felt different. Lighter, not just physically, but mentally. Maya and I started a ritual Sunday walks by the river, followed by lunch at a little diner. She'd tell me stories about her wild 20s and how every heartbreak taught her something about freedom. One afternoon, she said, "You're not losing weight, Rachel. You're losing burdens. That's why your face looks softer. That's peace, not pounds." I laughed, but she was right. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't living for anyone else's approval. The next morning, I woke before dawn and went for a jog. The air was cool, the sky bruised with the first light of sunrise. As I reached the top of the hill overlooking the park, I stopped, hands on my knees, breathing hard. The city stretched out below me, quiet and silver in the early light. I closed my eyes and whispered, I don't need him to see me. I just need to see myself again. And for the first time since my birthday, I really did. A year can change everything, your body, your habits, your mind, even the way you walk into a room. I used to enter spaces quietly, shrinking myself, afraid to take up too much of anyone's air. Now I walked taller. My hair was shorter, lighter. I'd lost the weight, yes, but that wasn't the point. The heaviness had been emotional. The guilt, the resentment, the endless need to please everyone but myself. That's what had weighed me down. I was still working the same job, but with new energy. I started taking on projects no one else wanted, and succeeded. When my boss offered me a promotion, I didn't hesitate. I also launched something small on the side, a home organization service for women going through divorce or life changes. It started as a favor to one of the women from the group, but word spread fast. It wasn't just about closets or furniture, it was about helping women clear space emotionally. I called it Room to Breathe. Emma, my daughter, thrived too. She smiled more now, coming over every weekend. We'd cook, talk about her college plans, and sometimes just sit in silence, content. Caleb, though, was distant. He'd chosen to live with Eric and Lily. I didn't blame him. He was 20, trying to make sense of divided loyalties. Every so often, I get texts from him. Short ones. Hey, how are you? Or, can you send me that lasagna recipe? I always replied, keeping it light. But beneath it all, I missed him fiercely. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, he called. His voice was uncertain, softer than I remembered. Mom. Hey, honey, I said, trying not to sound surprised. Everything okay?
Yeah.
He paused. Things are weird here. Dad and Lily fight a lot. She's not what I expected. I waited. She goes out a lot. Leaves the baby with Dad. He's tired all the time. I think he regrets. He stopped himself.
Anyway.
I just wanted to say I miss you. That was all he said. But it was enough to make me cry for the first time in months. Not from sadness, but from something closer to release. A few weeks later, it happened. I ran into Eric. I was at a cafe downtown, meeting a client for Room to Breathe. It had been a long morning, and I was sipping my coffee when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Rachel. I turned. He looked smaller somehow. Still well-dressed, still composed, but the confidence was cracked around the edges. His hair had more gray, his face more lines. Eric. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He glanced at me, his expression flickering with disbelief. You look different. I said simply. We sat down, more out of politeness than curiosity. He asked about the kids, about my work. He smiled too much, trying to hide his discomfort. Then, inevitably, he said, I'm sorry. I looked at him for a long time. For what, exactly? For the way things ended. I wasn't fair to you. That's true. He nodded, eyes lowering. Lily and I were having problems. I thought I knew what I wanted, but he trailed off, waiting for me to fill the silence. I didn't. He cleared his throat. You look amazing, Rachel. I mean it. Like you've found yourself again. I have, I said. But not because of you leaving. Because I finally stopped waiting for anyone to tell me who I am. He winced a little. I didn't mean to hurt you that much. Yes, you did, I said gently. You just didn't think I'd survive it. He didn't reply. When we parted, he hesitated. Maybe we could have dinner sometime. Just to talk. I smiled, not out of cruelty, but clarity. Thank you, but I don't dine with ghosts. I walked out before he could respond. That night, I told Maya. She threw her head back and laughed. Oh, that's poetic justice, she said. You didn't need to hurt him. Your piece did the talking. She was right. I didn't need revenge. My calm was louder than any act of vengeance could ever be. By summer, Room to Breathe had become something bigger. I started running small workshops for women rebuilding after heartbreak, how to declutter, refocus, and reclaim space. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. One of my clients, a young mother, hugged me after a session and said, You don't just organize homes. You organize hearts. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, thinking about those words. I realized I wasn't rebuilding a life anymore. I'd built a new one. A few months later, Caleb came over for dinner. He brought flowers, lilies of all things. Sorry, he said awkwardly. They were on sale. I laughed. They're beautiful. Over dinner, he told me about his classes, about the baby, about how Dad's not really himself lately. I think he misses you, he added. I looked down at my plate. He misses the version of me that made his life easy. Caleb nodded slowly. You're different now. Stronger. I guess he doesn't know what to do with that. After he left, I stood at the window, the lilies glowing softly in the dim kitchen light. For a moment, I thought about Eric, not with anger, not even with sadness. Just acceptance. The love I'd had for him had changed form. It no longer belonged to him. It belonged to me. Before bed, I opened my journal and wrote, "Healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without the ache." Then I added another line, almost without thinking. He walked away from me thinking I was weak. He'll spend the rest of his life realizing I was just unfinished. I smiled as I closed the notebook. Tomorrow, I'd wake up early, make coffee, and go for my run, the same way I had for months. But this time, I'd run not to escape the past, but to meet the future head-on. 2 years after my 40th birthday, I no longer recognized the woman who'd sat in the rain that night, broken and unsure. That version of me had disappeared quietly, without ceremony, without applause, replaced by someone stronger, freer, and entirely my own. I'd bought a small house by the edge of town, cream walls, ivy climbing the porch, sunlight pouring through the kitchen every morning. For the first time in my life, every decision inside it was mine. No compromises. No explanations. The first thing I hung on the wall wasn't a family photo. It was a framed quote Maya had given me. You don't find yourself after loss. You build yourself from what's left. Every morning, I'd read it while sipping coffee before work, a ritual that felt like prayer. Room to Breathe had grown beyond what I'd ever imagined. It started with women from the support group, a few homes, then referrals, then local media picked up the story. I didn't just help organize spaces anymore. I helped women organize their comebacks. We hosted weekend retreats called Starting Over Sundays. They weren't about dieting, revenge, or becoming the woman someone else wanted. They were about self-respect, about the quiet strength of women who'd been underestimated, abandoned, or dismissed, and chose to rise anyway. I saw my old self in so many of them. The tears behind polite smiles, the exhaustion of carrying families on their backs. But I also saw what came next, the spark that returns when you stop apologizing for wanting more. My daughter Emma often helped at the events. She'd turned 18 and was heading to college soon. One afternoon, she looked around the room full of women sharing stories and whispered, "You built all this from nothing." I smiled. "No, honey. I built it from pain." She squeezed my hand. "You're happier now, Mom. I can tell." And I was. Genuinely, peacefully happy. It was early autumn when I heard from Eric again. He called one evening, his name flashing on my phone for the first time in almost a year. I let it ring twice before answering. "Rachel," he said softly. I didn't know who else to call. There was a pause. I could hear the weight in his breathing. "Lily's gone," he said finally. "She left. Took the baby, moved out. I think she's seeing someone else." I didn't know what to say. A strange mix of pity and closure swelled in my chest. "I'm sorry, Eric," I said gently. And I meant it not because I still loved him, but because I didn't. "I keep thinking about us," he continued. "About how I ruined everything. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too stupid to see it." Once, those words would have cracked me open. Now, they just felt distant, like hearing a story that used to belong to someone else. He hesitated. "Could we meet? Just talk." I took a breath. "Eric, I'm not angry anymore. You don't owe me anything, and I don't owe you closure." He was silent. Then I said, softly but firmly, "Thank you for leaving when you did. You didn't destroy me. You freed me. And before he could answer, I hung up. That night, I sat on my porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunset burn the sky into gold and crimson. The wind rustled through the trees, and I thought about how endings are often disguised as beginnings. Eric had been the storm. Painful, yes, but he'd cleared the air. Without that storm, I never would have learned to breathe again. A few weeks later, I turned 42. Maya threw a small gathering at my house, just close friends and a handful of women from our retreats. There were flowers, laughter, music. No lavish gifts, no forced toasts. Just warmth. Emma brought a bouquet of daisies and said, "You look happier than ever, Mom." I smiled, touching her cheek. Because I finally am. We took pictures, not perfect ones, just real. Me laughing mid-sentence, Maya dancing barefoot, the house glowing behind us. At some point, I slipped away to the porch again, wine in hand, listening to the laughter drifting through the open windows. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who'd measured her worth in sacrifices and silence. She deserved this peace. Later that night, after everyone had left, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. The same one I'd started 2 years ago, on that first lonely night in the apartment. I flipped to the last page and wrote, "He left me to feel small. But life taught me that shrinking never saves you. It just makes it easier for people to step over you." Then I added, "Now I stand tall. Not to be seen, but because I finally can." Before bed, I caught my reflection in the window. The lines around my eyes were deeper, yes, but so was the calm behind them. I wasn't the same woman who'd once begged to be loved. I was a woman who'd learned to love herself enough not to beg. Tomorrow, I'd host another retreat. A room full of women standing at the same crossroads I once faced. I'd look at them and say, "You think your story ended." But it didn't. It just started using your real name. And maybe, just maybe, one of them would walk out of there ready to stand in the rain and start over, not because she had to, but because she finally wanted to. When I turned off the light, the house fell into peaceful silence. The kind of silence that doesn't echo with absence, but hums with freedom. I smiled into the darkness. Because for the first time in my life, everything, the pain, the loss, the rebuilding, had led me exactly where I was meant to be. Living by my own rules. And it was beautiful.